The game that was intended to be a big comeback following a sort of drop in quality, but wound up ultimately being the end of an era. Let us hear now the story of the tragedy of, if I can find it, Need for Speed Undercover. The original Need for Speed came out on the ill-fated Interactive 3DO player, a console that was made to compete with the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. It flopped horribly, but Need for Speed was massively popular, so they ported the game to other consoles, namely the Sony PlayStation, for the next generation. Other games would come out, but Need for Speed couldn't really seem to get a foothold against competition, such as Mario Kart and Sony's new entry, Gran Turismo. As it was known colloquially, it's really Gran Turismo, apparently. Shut up, British people, we got our colloquialisms. Gran Turismo and its sequel Gran Turismo 2 had a monopoly on the original PlayStation, although other driving-based games would come along but would fail to take down the Polyphony digital titan. Eventually, come the year 2001, the game would change, thanks to a little-known movie called The Fast and the Furious. Following The Fast and the Furious' release, suddenly street racing culture was big, and Need for Speed, well, Electronic Arts really, captured this craze and released Need for Speed Underground, to much acclaim. The next year, 2002, they would go back to the arcade style with Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2, which is honestly my favorite in the franchise. Can you blame me? And this came 1 year after the release of Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec, the best-selling in the Gran Turismo franchise. So still, EA was getting its ass handed to them by Polyphony Digital, this relatively unknown company. And then 2003 rolled around, and Need for Speed Underground 2 was released. This was the game that improved on what was going on with Underground 1 and made things so much better. Big customization options, fun game mechanics. It was near perfect and really gave rise, alongside The Fast and the Furious, to street racing culture increase in the United States. These two went together like peanut butter and jelly. Add in a little bit of Limp Bizkit and you'd be perfect. It was the early 2000s. Eventually, Need for Speed would hit their biggest peak with the next game, Most Wanted. Need for Speed Most Wanted essentially did what Need for Speed Underground 2 did, but now with cops. Sure, there was less customization in that one, but there were cops. Finally, cops. You know, Need for Speed's whole gimmick since Hot Pursuit 1. Ultimately, Need for Speed went on to challenge Gran Turismo and even Mario Kart and Forza Motorsports on the Microsoft Xbox. And it became a titan, even besting EA's other offering in racing, the NASCAR Thunder Series, then the NASCAR Series, as it would later be rebranded to. Along the way, Need for Speed games would start to seem like they were copying themselves. In 2006, there was Need for Speed Carbon, which wasn't really as good. It was still a great game, but it wasn't as good as Most Wanted. It just felt like Most Wanted, but in the dark. I don't own Carbon, though I wish to at some point in the future. Then there was Need for Speed Pro Street, which was a clear thing to compete with Gran Turismo 4, which was still doing very well, but clearly EA wanted a cut of the track racing culture. It didn't catch on that well. Well, now EA had a thing. Go back to our sandbox style that we had with Carbon and Most Wanted, and what resulted seemed to have been a weird mishmash hybrid of Underground 2 and Most Wanted, in the sense of all the customization and more, and cops. But there was some problems, and the biggest problem was the game was short and the game was too easy. But it really wasn't a bad game. A tragedy? Yes. A bad game? Not really. Like, the gameplay mechanics were still pretty fun, and crashing into stuff was pretty fun still. And the mechanics for customization? They were great! Shoot, I'd even say they were superior to Underground 2, which I love Underground 2 more than this game, but oh my lord. There's no denying the customization is just superior with this of the PS2 Need for Speeds. But sadly, because of the flop that this game was, or the flop in EA's eyes, it resulted in the death of Black Box, who was behind the Need for Speed game since 2002. What was also this game's downfall was a sort of incoherent, weird story. Let me go into a little bit of detail here with each game's story. Need for Speed Most Wanted had a pretty coherent story. You're racing your way up to the top of the blacklist. Your car got sabotaged by a egotistical blacklist racer, and now you gotta build your way back up and get your car back, which he stole, all while avoiding being arrested by the Rockport Police Department, led by the corrupt Sergeant Cross. Pretty coherent, okay, great. Need for Speed Underground 2 was you're a top street racer in another city. I forgot the name of this other city, and you're asked to join a particular street racing gang. You turn down the offer, and then you get involved in a near-fatal accident orchestrated by a bad guy from the city of Bayview. You go to Bayview, and you dominate the street racing scene and prevent it from getting co-opted by this bad guy. If I remember, his name was Caleb. I beat the game recently, almost 100%. I have 98% of this game beaten. It's got a pretty tricky to follow storyline, but once you get the hang of it, you got the hang of it. Need for Speed Hot Pursuit. Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2 didn't have a storyline. It was an arcade-style racer, in which you go around and run various enclosed tracks, rack up NFS points, not most wanted points, and you unlock new cars. You unlock the regular versions of cars, you unlock police cars, you unlock special Need for Speed versions of cars, which the NFS versions of cars are normally faster and have a unique paint scheme. The plot to Need for Speed Undercover? Well, you're an undercover cop working to bust a street racing group which stole a bunch of dock cars, which were cars that were getting imported at the time. They were stolen in broad daylight, and you gotta infiltrate 2 street racing groups to find out. You have a street racing group led by a guy named Hector, who, with that, you meet his friends Zach and Carmen. Now, Carmen sticks around, but you off Hector and Zach into the game. And you find out that they weren't behind the heist at all. Then you go infiltrate a group led by a man named G-Mac, a former cop who was kicked out of the force for his extreme brutality. It's found out that they didn't steal the car, but as it turns out, it was all orchestrated by a guy working with the Triads named Cha Wu. He stole the car in collaboration with Chase Lynn, the undercover investigator who's co-leading the investigation. She did it all to basically pose as a front to get rid of the street racing groups and basically give more power to the Triads. You bust Chase Lynn because in her plight to get control, she shoots and kills Cha Wu. The story's kind of messy, but coherent in a sense. It's not as strong as the other 2 games, but it's not a horrible story. So why did the game flop? Its story wasn't really god-awful. Weak, kinda. God-awful, no. Was it just because of the easy difficulty? That's probably it, because with Most Wanted, this game is still really frickin' challenging. I still can't beat this game 100%. I've beaten the story, yes. 100%, still having trouble. This game has been the cause of many a smashed controller in my house. So, Now that I've talked about the game and the storyline and its origins and all that, let's go over to the chair and the old TV over there, pop it in, see what the big deal is. Alright, so let's begin with the gameplay. First off, you look at the animation here, and it looks a little bit more cartoony compared to the other games. So, career mode. I don't have the proper memory card put in here, so let's see if it'll let me start a career. It's just... oh, it's making me create an alias. Well, we're not really gonna save. Wait, why is it playing the music? It's not supposed to be doing that. I think we're gonna have to turn down the television. This game has copyrighted music, and for the sake of not getting this video taken down off the internet, because, you know, you never know when Sony Music Entertainment Japan's gonna have their greedy, grubby little grubbers all over this crap. Alright. Maggie Q, Christina Milian, I don't know the name, I missed it. Heather Fox, David Reese Snell. Joshua Alba, Kurt Caceres, Jack Yang, Paul Pape. These are the actors who play in the live-action cutscenes. I recall Jet Li being in this. Maybe I was wrong. But the biggest name is definitely Maggie Q. Alright, so this is the, how to say, tutorial. So like previous Need for Speed games, X is accelerate, left analog stick is steer, though you can change this to right analog stick. Why would you do that, you fucking sadist? And or directional button. Well, you can't do and, it's one or the other. As for everything else, left is your mini-map. Right is your mailbox. Up, I don't think does anything. Down, if you're in free roam, will call 911. And you have like 5 seconds before the police show up. Square is brake, hold square for a while and becomes reverse. Circle is pursuit breaker, or really time breaker. Yeah, okay. L1 is shift down, R1 is shift up, L2 is handbrake, and R2 is nitrous. The L3 and R3 buttons don't do anything. And of course you have some new style pursuit breakers, like, well, highway signs. Highway signs were a pursuit breaker that was absent from, well, the other games. So far as I know, it was absent from Carbon. So, you do that, and you have a rank bonus here. The cash is, of course, part of tradition.
Arrests are up 30% over last.
And here's the first cutscene. I'll turn it up for you guys.
You've had quite an impressive run. Your recent undercover operation posing as a wheelman to bust car thieves has been exceptional. But these local police stings can take months, if not years, to execute. I don't have that kind of time. We only have a couple of weeks. The FBI is stepping in. I'll be your new point person. We suspect one of the local street racing crews may be involved with an international smuggling ring.
Look, lady, pardon me for butting in here, but these kind of crews, they just don't go do that sort of
Keller,
smug-
my office doesn't care about turbocharged street thugs. We're looking to recover evidence that we believe is linked to a shipment of cars stolen from the dock a few weeks ago. This evidence will convict a network of crime lords in half a dozen countries, and we have reason to believe that the cars may be in the possession of one of the street crews. Now, they're going to need a wheelman. Your job is to drive. My job is to get you in. Nothing more and nothing less.
And that's your first cutscene. And now you get to buy your own first car. You could start with either the Nissan 240 SX, the Dodge Challenger, the Chevrolet Camaro SS, first generation, the Mitsubishi Eclipse GT. I typically start with the Dodge Challenger. problem is, it costs everything you have. Meanwhile, the Mitsubishi Eclipse GT only costs $20,000 and does way better in top speed. But each car has its advantage. The 240SX is best with handling, the Challenger is best with acceleration, the Camaro, well, this thing just seems to be there. And it would seem the Eclipse GT is best with top speed. So let's start with the Eclipse this time. We'll do automatic, because I'm a noob. Oh, I don't want to save changes. So you start with 3 races: Downtown Sprint, Redwood Loop, and Uptown Circuit. Now there's some new forms of racing in this, like Time Circuit. Time Circuit is basically an endurance race that lasts time. Think the 24-hour Le Mans. Whoever has the most laps after a set amount of time wins. But I don't have one of them unlocked. Toll Booth Racing also makes its return from Need for Speed Most Wanted. But it's different than it was in Most Wanted, where the toll booths were set in place. Now the toll booths are basically just spawning all over the road, all willy-nilly. So, let's see how my stock Eclipse does against the big boys. And just like previous Need for Speeds, you do not start with nitrous. But you always have the time breaker. Now, of course, they're going to water it down. Oh, and for the record, there are 3 difficulty settings: easy, medium, and hard. I think you can change these at any point in the game. So, yeah. But easy seems to be too easy. Medium, okay, medium's fair enough. But with some races in easy, they get tricky quick. For example, you run against a guy in a GT350, a Shelby, in your car, your little whatever tuner you buy. And the GT350 is a good car. And just like that, the race is over. And you got a message. The messages seem to be done in tradition as it was in Underground 2. I don't know if these were in Underground because, again, I've never played. Oh god, the camera is so out of focus. So your safe house, it's basically a big wide open area. So you got your statistics, your save, world map, your cars, free roam. You can modify cars in My Cars. Customize, and this will be for performance, something called Auto Sculpt, visuals, aftermarket. Let me show you what Auto Sculpt does. You can pick a part you want to put on the car, and you can customize it to your liking. Which would be like wheels, front bumpers, rear bumpers, side skirts, hoods. You name it, you can change it. So let me show you what you can pretty much do with these. Alright, we'll do Stag. So, Zone 1, where it's blinking here, you get to change the size and proportion of it. This Auto Sculpt alone makes it so there are just endless possibilities for customizing your car. Sweeper looked pretty cool. Let's work on that. Bigger is better. Pointy. Looks fast. But keep an eye on your shopping cart. This game will let you go like way above your limit and you won't even know it. so keep your eyes peeled. The hoods are the most fun to customize, and you can even later change them to carbon fiber, though it's unlocked later in the game. With some cars, you can trick it out to have a supercharger sticking out of the hood right here. Like what I did here, for the old muscle cars like the Charger, the Challenger, the GT350, you can make that a supercharger. It's so cool. Pretty much your possibilities are near endless with what you can do with these cars. I wasn't gonna buy, but you pretty much get the hint. You can unlock police cars later in the game and enter You're the Cop modes like you could with Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2. But unlike them, you actually earn money, and it's a little bit more different this time. Instead of beating the cars up and forcing them to the side of the road while using spike strips or a helicopter to help you arrest the bad guys, you just beat up the car. That's all you do. You just ram it until its health meter gets low. They do these in waves of 8, and once you've arrested 8, you get anywhere from in the teens thousands to 20-some thousand. It's convenient for when you don't want to go back and grind races or past driver jobs, which are special little missions you can run that will give you big bucks and even unlock some cars. And the color customization options for these cars are just phenomenal. You got gloss, you got metallic, you got matte, you got pearl, you got chrome, you got candy, and you got iridescent. Pretty much though, I'd say the only game that this comes close to with its customization option, no, better than even, Gran Turismo Sport. Like look, I can make this any shade I want. Look how bright that is. The colors are super bright though, that's the problem. That's a real big problem. So if you're sensitive to bright light, have fun with your seizures, fam. But overall, and you can even increase like wheel size and all that like before. Drop the ride height, window tint still here. You can add as many vinyls as you want. One time I had a Dodge Viper SRT10. I tricked it out to look like the Viper GTSR race cars that run in Le Mans. This game is just phenomenal for its customization. Its difficulty isn't really much to ride home on though. And I think that was the problem. Need for Speed players played the games for a challenge. And this game wasn't that big of a challenge. It's easy to get 100% completion on it. It's easy to grind for races and cars. And it's easy to just have a decent modded car by the time you need to enter races. So overall, I think this game's true downfall was its lack of proper difficulty, to say really. Its difficulty was too easy. Need for Speed's ultimate shortcoming was of its own previous expectations. Everyone knew Need for Speed at the time for being the challenging, fun, high-paced action that it had. I mean, compared to its competitors Forza, Gran Turismo, and Mario Kart, Need for Speed had a little bit of something that everyone liked. It had customization. You had to know when to use the nitrous and the time breakers just right. Avoid the cops. It had everything. Need for Speed Undercover seemed to have just watered it all down. It was so easy to get away from the cops, and the pursuit breakers were plentiful and everywhere. And of course, they didn't have the big, heavy vehicles. I mean, they did have vehicles that were like Lamborghini Gallardos and Porsche 911s and Mustangs as cop cars. But ultimately, they just weren't heavy compared to the previous games, where like the Corvettes and Most Wanted were ridiculously heavy and hard to push out of the way. And then, of course, you had the fully loaded Rhino cars that would come and just plow into you to try to stop you. Didn't have any of that. And because of the easier difficulty, Need for Speed Undercover didn't do as well. It still did well, but it didn't do as well as its predecessors. And it was because of this, EA Black Box was shut down by EA. Because of the sin of it didn't live up to the hype of its predecessors, which is a common occurrence with EA. But Need for Speed would still live on, of course. The next 2 years, there would be Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 3, which was actually really good. Really good, actually. But then they tried to recapture the lightning in the bottle with the success of Most Wanted in 2012. Remaking Need for Speed Most Wanted and littering it with microtransactions. Nowadays, Need for Speed has attempted comebacks, but it seems like they're not going to recapture what they had previously had. Meanwhile, its competitors, Mario Kart, is having one of its best times ever with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Switch. Gran Turismo stepped into the world of esports with GT Sport. Forza just still exists. But Need for Speed, it's got a lot of work to do if it ever wants to have the success of its predecessors. Overall, do I think Undercover was a bad game? Not in any way, shape, or form. Easy? Yes, easy. Definitely easy. Compared to the others. Bad? No. Easy difficulty doesn't make it a bad game. If that was the case, then shoot. You could say... I don't know what you could say. I really should have wrote a script for that part. Overall, I give the game 4 out of 5. Customization is probably the best of any game I've ever seen. The mechanics were fun. The police chases, while easy, were fun. But I'm gonna have to take a point off due to the lack of challenge like there were with the previous games. So, overall, I would recommend the game. But if you're into challenge with Need for Speed, I say proceed with caution, because it's just one word to describe it: easy. And that concludes this episode of Brandon's Basement. Happy Independence Day, and after 5 takes, I finally got this fucking segment done. See you guys.